Beyond the Gates spoilers, Chelsea Hamilton's struggle, addiction, crisis, and the unraveling of a life. Chelsea Hamilton's return to her hedonistic lifestyle comes at a time when her life should have been defined by personal growth and stability. But instead, it is marked by the unraveling of everything she once knew. The news of Anita Dupree's devastating breast cancer diagnosis was supposed to be a turning point for Chelsea, a reminder of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. Yet, for Chelsea, this diagnosis, combined with the recent news of her own genetic test results, was the spark that ignited a far darker path. Her decision to embrace her life with a sense of reckless abandon has already set her on a collision course with addiction and the haunting possibility of self-destruct. It begins with the gene test. The BRCA gene, a series of genetic mutations that increase the risk of breast cancer, runs in Chelsea's family, with her mother, Donnie Dupree, testing positive. When Chelsea receives her results, she breathes a sigh of relief. She is negative. For a moment, it feels as though the weight of the world has been lifted off her shoulders. She is free from the possibility of an inherited illness that has plagued her family for years. But instead of feeling gratitude or relief, Chelsea's relief quickly morphs into an overwhelming desire to live life on her own terms, without the constraints of fear or responsibility. In a moment of rebellion and unbridled joy, Chelsea decides to revisit the life she left behind: the wild, extravagant parties, the carefree nights, the reckless indulgence. She immerses herself once more in the hedonistic lifestyle that once gave her a sense of purpose. The shallow and fleeting. But what was meant to be a celebration quickly turns into something much darker. It's no longer just about the occasional drink or a wild night out. It's about escaping the very reality she finds herself trapped in. At an upscale club in Uptown, as Chelsea and Madison Montgomery, her longtime partner, celebrate, an old acquaintance appears. A figure from Chelsea's past, a former drug dealer, now operating in the shadows, offers them a taste of what Chelsea once found so enticing. The offer is simple: free samples of the pills that once provided Chelsea with an intoxicating escape. For Chelsea, this is an opportunity to recapture the fleeting thrill of those days, to forget about her responsibilities and her anxieties. For Madison, this is a terrifying reminder of the woman she once knew, someone who let addiction consume her. Madison's reaction is swift and firm. She recoils at the sight of the drugs, disgusted by the temptation that is being put in front of them. Her refusal is not just out of concern for Chelsea's well-being, but also out of a deep fear of losing her partner to the same darkness that once consumed her. Madison has always known Chelsea's demons, but this feels different. This feels like a final test, one that could either break or save their relationship. But Chelsea, driven by the urge to embrace life without limitations, cannot resist. She takes the pills, and in that moment, a part of her feels liberated, free from the burden of being the woman who constantly has to worry about her health, her business, and her relationships. It's as though, for a brief, fleeting moment, she has been given permission to let go of everything that has kept her bound. However, what Chelsea doesn't anticipate is how quickly the drugs will take hold of her. What begins as a temporary escape turns into a spiral of addiction. The pills, at first a means of self-medication, soon transform into something far more dangerous. Chelsea finds herself returning to the dealer again and again, craving the numbness they bring. As her dependency deepens, she becomes more erratic, her behavior more unpredictable. She's no longer just living for herself, she's living in a haze, detached from the very reality she once sought to escape. She wants to help, but Chelsea's descent into addiction feels inevitable. Madison's own struggles with control and the pressures of maintaining Chelsea Cat, the social media empire they've built together, make it nearly impossible for her to focus entirely on Chelsea's well-being. The strain on their relationship grows as Madison watches helplessly, unable to pull Chelsea out of the abyss she's falling into. Their relationship reaches a breaking point when Chelsea's behavior becomes too erratic to ignore. Madison, despite her deep feelings for Chelsea, can no longer stand by and watch as the woman she loves destroys herself. The tension between them escalates as Chelsea becomes more defensive, refusing to admit that she has a problem. Her addiction has taken root, and the woman she once knew is slipping away, replaced by someone who is consumed by her need for escape. The breaking point comes one evening when Chelsea, intoxicated, makes a decision that could change everything. During one of their heated arguments, she lashes out, telling Madison that she is no longer the person she once was, that she doesn't need Madison's help, and that she's going to live her life the way she wants, no matter the consequences. As Chelsea storms out, Madison is left standing, heartbroken and helpless. In that moment, she realizes that no matter how much she loves Chelsea, there is nothing she can do to stop her from spiraling further into addiction. As Chelsea continues her reckless behavior, the consequences become more severe. Her business, once thriving, begins to suffer as her focus shifts entirely to her drug use. Chelsea Cat, the brand she and Madison built together, is left in disarray, with contracts being missed and social media posts going dark. Her followers, once loyal and engaged, begin to notice the change in her demeanor. The glamorous, confident woman they once admired is nowhere to be found. In her place is a woman who can barely hold it together, who has become a shadow of her former self. The reality of her situation begins to set in when Chelsea experiences a terrifying overdose. A moment that was meant to be another wild escape turns into a medical emergency. She is rushed to the hospital, where doctors work quickly to save her life. It is a wake-up call, a painful reminder that Chelsea is not invincible, that the lifestyle she once glorified has consequences that can no longer be ignored. But even then, as she lies in the sterile hospital room, Chelsea's first thought is not of recovery, it's of how to get back to the drugs that made her feel alive. Madison, devastated by the turn of events, must now decide if she can continue to stand by Chelsea. Their love for each other is undeniable. But can Madison save her from herself? The road to recovery is long and uncertain, and Chelsea must confront the hardest battle of her life own that will require more than just love and support. She will need to find the strength to overcome her addiction and rebuild the life that she has nearly destroyed. For Chelsea, the question remains, can she pull herself back from the brink, or is she doomed to repeat the mistakes of her past? And for Madison, the question is whether she can be the one to help Chelsea find redemption, or if she will have to walk away and let Chelsea face her demons alone. This is just the beginning of a long and painful journey, one that will test the limits of love, loyalty, and the power of addiction. For Chelsea Hamilton, the stakes have never been higher, and the consequences of her actions will resonate far beyond her personal life. As February looms closer, a cloud of uncertainty hovers over Chelsea Hamilton. The narrative arc of her life, once filled with the promise of redemption and personal growth, now seems to be spiraling into darkness. With every passing day, Chelsea's internal struggles become more pronounced, and her emotional fragility grows more apparent. What started as a mere slip back into her old hedonistic habits has escalated into a much darker trajectory that could potentially cost her everything. The catalyst for this downward spiral was, without a doubt, the tumultuous breakup with Madison Montgomery, the woman Chelsea had once built a life with. Their relationship had been a constant source of emotional support and a refuge for Chelsea. But with Madison's departure, that safe haven crumbled. Chelsea, left alone with the weight of her own demons, now finds herself teetering on the edge of self-destruct. The breakup wasn't just the end of a romantic relationship, it was the loss of her anchor, the person who had kept her grounded. Without Madison, Chelsea was unmoored, and the only thing that seemed to offer temporary solace was the numbness of drugs, alcohol, and the reckless abandon of a party-fueled lifestyle. But Chelsea's struggles run deeper than the dissolution of her love life. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just before the breakup, Chelsea had received devastating news about her mother, and neither Dupree. Her battle with breast cancer was worsening, and the toll on Chelsea was becoming too much to bear. At the same time, the fear of her own genetic predisposition to breast cancer after her mother tested positive for the BTG gene, haunted her. Although Chelsea's test results came back negative, the fear of an uncertain future and the overwhelming pressure of her family's medical history pushed her to a breaking point. It wasn't just Anita's cancer that Chelsea struggled to accept. It was the terrifying realization that her fate might mirror her mother's, the looming specter of the disease hanging over her. Even without the genetic predisposition, adding to the weight of her personal battles was the traumatic experience she endured months earlier. Last fall, Chelsea was abducted by someone she once trusted, Allison, a former lover, fan, and stalker who had obsessed over her for far too long. The emotional toll of that harrowing ordeal had never fully healed. While the physical scars had faded, the psychological damage remained deeply entrenched in Chelsea's psyche. The memory of that dark period resurfaced, stirring up feelings of vulnerability, fear, and helplessness. In a cruel twist, Chelsea found herself in a position where she was forced to face not just her physical health, but the deep-seated emotional wounds that Allison had inflicted upon her. In the aftermath of Madison's departure, Chelsea retreated into her old coping mechanism, partying, and, eventually, turning to drugs to fill the empty space that had once been occupied by Madison's love and presence. The allure of alcohol and substances became stronger with each passing day. She craved the temporary high they provided, a fleeting escape from the relentless weight of her own fears and insecurities. At first, it was just the occasional drink at a party or a glass of wine at home to numb the pain. But soon, it wasn't enough. The longing for something more potent grew, and Chelsea found herself at a crossroads. She could either face her demons head-on and risk losing herself in the process, or she could bury them beneath layers of alcohol and pills, pretending that everything was fine. The tipping point came one cold evening, when Chelsea, feeling more vulnerable than ever, found herself surrounded by people she barely knew. At a club in uptown, the music thumped in her chest, the strobe lights flickered, and the energy of the crowd became a chaotic blur in her mind. She had just returned from yet another doctor's appointment, the results of which had left her feeling defeated. The pills, the ones she had used in the past to escape, beckoned once again. In the haze of the party, Chelsea couldn't resist. She had a taste of the drug, just a little, just enough to feel the familiar rush. But this time, it was different. This time, the effects hit her harder, faster. Chelsea had already been drinking heavily, her body unprepared for the combination of alcohol and drugs. As the night wore on, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She could barely stand, her vision blurred, her thoughts scattered. Her body felt heavy, like it was being dragged beneath the weight of her own decisions. Chelsea had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. In that moment of confusion and self-doubt, Chelsea found herself at the mercy of the very thing that had once brought her a fleeting sense of freedom, the drugs. But this time, the escape didn't feel as sweet. It felt dangerous, destructive, like it was going to swallow her whole. With the drugs and alcohol coursing through her system, Chelsea's world started to spin out of control. She felt disconnected from reality, as if she was watching herself from the outside, unable to control her own actions. Every movement was like a blur, every decision made in a haze. As Chelsea spiraled further into this self-destructive behavior, the people around her began to notice the change. Madison, who had once been her partner in both business and life, watched from the sidelines, powerless to intervene. She knew Chelsea's demons better than anyone, but she also knew that Chelsea had to find her own way back. Madison had tried to hold on, to help Chelsea, but in the end, it was clear that Chelsea needed to make the decision to save herself. As the days passed, Madison's heart ached knowing that the woman she loved was drowning in her own turmoil, a victim of her own fears and pain. But for Chelsea, the situation was becoming desperate. The toll the drugs and alcohol were taking on her body was becoming impossible to ignore. The once glamorous world she had built was crumbling, and with every pill, with every drink, she was digging herself deeper into a hole she wasn't sure she could escape. The physical and emotional damage was mounting, and Chelsea's ability to cope was rapidly diminishing. The true danger now was the risk of overdose. What had begun as an escape had now become a life-threatening habit. Chelsea was no longer just playing with fire, she was dancing with it, and it was burning everything in its path. The fear of facing her truth, the fear of confronting the reality of her brokenness, had pushed her to this point. And now, she was teetering on the edge of a cliff, unsure of whether she would survive the fall. As Chelsea's world continued to spiral, the question remained, would she reach out for help before it was too late? Or would the weight of her past and her own fears drag her down further, leaving her unable to climb back up? The coming days would be critical. What happened next would determine if Chelsea Hamilton could reclaim her life or if she was destined to fall deeper into the darkness that had already claimed so much of her soul.